Well, my name is June Chandler Hora, and I was born in Florence, but my mother was living in Merle's Inlet. Florence was the nearest hospital back in those days, 1925. They came down in the late 1800s from Marion. They have a little area here over at Sunnyside they called it Little Marion. And my grandparents came in wagons, and they had to ford the river over at Gallivant's Ferry, but the women and children got in boats, and then they floated the wagons and across. They would pitch tents. They had some wooden bottoms, to put the tents on so the snakes couldn't get them. And they stayed here all summer. And then my mother was married in 1922, and she taught school down here at Burgess, which is, they don't have a school there anymore, of course. Well, they do too. Not Carolina Forest, what is that school? Anyway, it's over on the highway there. But anyway, she taught it was a one-teacher school. And she said she used to have to paint the bottom windows white so the children couldn't see out, because the deer would come in the yard, and that, of course, fascinated them. And she rode a horse to work to teach school. And she said she carried a pistol in her pocket because she was afraid of snakes and drunk men. So that's why she carried the pistol. Then she was married in 22. My father had come back from over the First World War. And we lived at my grandfather in Waukesha way back, and he sold it to Mr. Kimball, and we lived over there. My father farmed the area, and we had the school then at Merle's Inlet, and my mother taught there. He raised hogs, and we always had wild deer and squirrels and rabbits, and I don't know whether I could eat one of those. I do eat venison because my son, who just came in, he does kill deer, but we did. And then we lived from the creek. We could go out, and catch shrimp and fish and oysters, and that was what we lived on. There was no other, because back then the restaurants weren't that prevalent. Besides that, you couldn't get gas anyway to come to the beach. And back in those days, we had so many people that were hitchhiking, and they would stop. I don't know why. I think they must have had some knowledge that my mother would give food, but Lily was always there, and she would always feed them, whoever, came by. Well, there weren't any restaurants along the road, and but she would give them food. I remember Aunt Hager, who used to come to see us once a week. She had a stocking, and they would give her a cup of rice and tie a knot in it, and a cup of corn. A cup of everything that was dry that they could tie a little knot in between. And she would come, and Mama would share, the food with them. That's all we had. But we never were hungry, like a lot of people in towns were, I imagine, during the Depression. She did. As a matter of fact, my sister had diphtheria, so she was out of school for about a year, and she used to go with my mother to interview these former slaves, and she collected these for the Library of Congress. And then we had John Lomax came down here. He would record the songs, the spirituals, and the stories, and that was fascinating. I remember he had me sing a song. There's an old spinning wheel in the parlor, and I'll never forget when I got through. He said, you know, they would say whoever sang the song, and so he'd say, said, this is sung by Miss June Chandler at Murrells Inlet, South Carolina, in 1936 for the benefit of the Library of Congress in Washington. And on the tape, I said, oh my goodness, they're not going to play that in Washington, are they? I think I was about 11 years old. But it was fun back in those days when they would come and record those songs and stories. I remember when I was in the first grade, Miss Wessel from Andrews was my teacher, and she took us over to Georgetown to the Strand Theater to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that was, let's see, I don't know, it was in the 30s, in the middle 30s, I guess. But we had to ride up the ferry boat. There was no bridge at Georgetown then, and it had not been built, so only about, I guess, maybe 8 cars could ride on the ferry over there. But that was an experience. It was an all-day trip to go over to Georgetown, but can you imagine no more traffic than that, you know? It was fascinating, it really was. I remember the classes were by rows, because maybe one grade, the first grade might have 5 children, and then the second grade might have 2 or 3. It never were the same number in each grade. And our school bus was Mr. Beatty. He was the teacher there, and I think the only people that were on the bus were the Chandler children and the Wilson children over at Wachesaw. And sometimes he didn't make it, so we had to walk. But well, it was about 3 miles, I guess. And also, this was interesting, and I think they're doing that now in some of the schools. They had a big fence built in the backyard, and it was real high. You couldn't see over it. And at recess, the boys had to stay on one side and the girls on the other side. And someone told me in Charlotte, I think that's one of the schools they were doing that now. Might be a good idea, I don't know. I can't remember when the rationing went off, but I know they would just give you barely enough gas. My mother at that point worked at Brook Green Gardens, and she got enough gas to go back and forth to work, and that was it. But things were better during the war. You know, there were more jobs available. I know Ms. Lee that started Lee's Inlet Kitchen down here, and I worked at the air base at Myrtle Beach in the PX, and then I was secretary to the provost marshal. And you know, there were more jobs available, which it never had been before. I think the main place that they came to was what we call Little Marion, where my grandparents came. The same families come there, the Bates and the Ferries, the Bates from up around Columbia, and the Ferries and the Macmillans. And you know, and those homes have stayed in the families, because I think when you live at Murrells Inlet and you know what's out in the creek, you love it. And of course, if people don't, they want to be over on the beach. But we have so many things here that they don't have over there, because we can crab and fish. And then too, we all learned to water ski. When I was small, though, there was only one fella from there, and he had the Ford Motor Company, Tom Hunter, and he had a motorboat. We were really impressed with that. But it's fascinating now. I can sit out there and not even know if a boat's going by, because they're so quiet, which is wonderful. It really is. We had a little rowboat named the Zipper, and we would row over to the beach. We usually go on an outgoing tide and then come back with the tide. We had no life preservers. I don't know, we were just lucky none of us drowned. She was born down here, and her mother and father died, and my grandmother and grandfather Wilcox had a house in their yard, and they brought Lily and her sister and her brother to live with them. And well, she was a part of the family. We all loved Lily dearly. There's a picture of her over there that my mother painted with Aunt Hagar, and that was Hagar Brown. And I remember one thing that she always said to us, children, manners will get you everywhere. And she really, believe that she had a family too. But my brother, when he was serving in the Second World War, she sent him every birthday a cake, and she'd make one little layer for each year. I don't know what shape they were in when they arrived, but anyway, she did that, and she was like a mother. We loved her dearly. And Hagar Brown was too. They were just a part of the family. He had, I'm trying to think of the names, Moody, and I think that was his last name, but they called him Moody. Moody helped my father, and well, in fact, we owned, except for the Wilsons over at Waukesha, all of our neighbors were black over there, and they were our friends and playmates. And I'll never forget when my father was digging the foundation for a home there. Well, it was for the Kimball's cabin. They dug up an Indian cemetery, and they had folks from the Smithsonian come down to preserve the bones. It was fascinating. The heads were full of Indian beads, the trade beads. One of the girls had a brass anklet around her, and she was in the middle, and then around her were other bodies, and they said that sometimes they would, I guess, kill her maidens to go to the happy hunting ground with her. And I know there was one body that had a little baby in the arms, It was fascinating. But I think Waukesha, the Indian name for that is the place of the weeping. And we had found a lot of Indian artifacts there.